Moses Sechibogo, better known by his stage name Mowzey Radio, emerged from Uganda's eastern town of Jinja to become one of the country's most celebrated musical voices. His smooth R&B tone, lyrical depth, and partnership with Douglas Mayanja, popularly known as Weasel, reshaped the landscape of East African music. But his journey from school choir leader to BET-nominated artist ended abruptly on 1st February 2018 after a violent altercation at a popular nightclub in Entebbe set off a chain of events that shocked Uganda's music industry and brought a tragic end to one of Uganda's most prominent musical careers. Moses was born in 1985 in the Jinja district of Uganda. His early years balanced education and a growing passion for music nurtured through school competitions. After studying at Kira College Butiki, he earned a bachelor's degree in community sociology from Makerere University in 2005. According to various interviews, Radio was living in Kampala with his mother and worked part-time in his brother's barber shop, where his singing caught the attention of Ugandan musician Geoffrey Chaga. Chaga was so impressed by his talent that he offered to introduce Radio to legendary Ugandan musician Jose Chameleone. Radio, eager to meet his musical idol, showed up at the singer's home a few days later with a portrait of Chameleone that really impressed the singer. Chameleone welcomed Radio into his Leon Island band, where he met Douglas Weasel Mayanja. While with the band, Radio released early tracks like Jennifer and Sweet Lady. In October 2007, Radio, Weasel, and Chameleone toured the United States and the Caribbean. By 2008, after falling out with Chameleone during a US tour, Radio and Weasel split off to form their own group called the Good Life Crew. The two artists performed under the iconic stage name Radio and Weasel. Radio provided smooth R&B vocals, while Weasel's sound was a fusion of reggae and dancehall vibes. Their breakout single, Nakudata, was followed by a string of hits that dominated Uganda's airwaves and were frequently played in clubs and radio stations across the continent. In 2013, their rising influence was acknowledged globally when they received a BET nomination for Best International Act Africa. Although they didn't win, the nomination marked a high point in their career, introducing them to an international audience. Domestically, their dominance was cemented with multiple awards. Theirs was a rags to riches story, with both men starting from humble beginnings and making it big. However, there were also negative reports about their wild, partying lifestyle. On 21st January 2018, Mowzey Radio traveled to Entebbe in the company of his friend, popularly known as Producer Washington, to inspect a house he was building. Washington later recalled that during the drive, Radio spoke at length about life, love, and creative collaborations, even referencing the Bible. Washington described this conversation as uncharacteristic and unexpected. After visiting the construction site, Radio received a phone call from Pamela, a longtime friend of his, inviting him to meet her at The Bar, a popular entertainment joint in Entebbe town. They arrived between 5 and 6 p.m., finding Pamela in the company of friends. Radio joined them while Washington sat separately. Washington said that he started to get a bad feeling about the place and asked Radio if they could leave, but he declined. Washington eventually stepped outside to rest in the car. Meanwhile, according to Pamela, inside the bar, Radio had spotted the bar manager, George Egesa, and started to get irritated. According to some sources, Radio and George were not on good terms due to a previous misunderstanding. Witness accounts differ, but several agree that Radio became visibly agitated. By this time, Washington had walked back into the bar and noticed that Radio was annoyed and wanted to leave. Radio and George got into a heated verbal altercation. However, George tried to calm the situation by offering Radio half a bottle of Johnny Walker. Radio allegedly rejected the gesture and threw the bottle and glass aside and continued to insult George, saying he was too poor to afford a bottle of Johnny Walker. Hearing this, George ordered a full bottle to be brought to Radio. Upon receiving it, Radio allegedly began pouring its contents onto the floor, with some of it spilling onto nearby patrons, including George. The manager got angry and ordered Radio to leave. Some sources report that after he was ordered to leave, there was a brief physical altercation between Radio and George that was quickly broken up by bouncers and bystanders. As Radio and his friends were exiting the bar, Washington testified that a tall man, believed to be working as security, approached Radio and accused him of disrespecting the bar owner. The man then lifted Radio and slammed him head first onto the concrete floor. Washington testified that Radio was thrown so violently that he had his head crack once it hit the ground. Radio lay motionless on the floor. Despite the shock of the incident, Washington managed to carry his friend into the car and drove immediately to the nearest hospital in an attempt to save his life. Radio was first taken to Emmanuel Hospital, where initial treatment was delayed. An ambulance was later called to transfer him to Nsambia Hospital. Upon arrival, he was referred to Case Hospital due to lack of ICU space. Doctors at Case Hospital reported that he was admitted shortly after midnight on January 23, 2018, unconscious and with severe head injuries. He was diagnosed with bleeding in the brain and underwent emergency surgery to stop it. Radio's condition remained stable until it began to deteriorate, requiring mechanical ventilation. Despite continued medical intervention, he showed no improvement. On the morning of February 1, 2018, 10 days after the incident at the bar, 33-year-old Moses Sechibogo was pronounced dead. Within hours of his death, thousands took to social media to pay their respects, including Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni. Crowds of mourners gathered outside the Kampala hospital where he had passed away. His family and fans were also demanding quick and efficient police investigations, especially after what appeared to be cell phone footage of the incident circulated online. The Entebbe municipal authorities closed the bar lounge indefinitely and arrested several suspects, including the bar manager, George Egesa. The main suspect, identified as 28-year-old Godfrey Troy Wamala, was initially missing but later located following a police tip-off. On 5th February 2018, police arrested Godfrey in Wakiso district, where he had been hiding at a friend's house. During questioning, he admitted to being at the scene but denied assaulting Radio, claiming that he found the musician already injured and laying outside. Godfrey was transferred to Entebbe police station and charged with murder. At trial, he maintained his innocence, but witnesses, including producer Washington and Pamela, testified that they saw him physically attack Radio. Godfrey was initially charged with murder, but was later convicted of manslaughter by an Entebbe High Court judge. The court found that he had caused Radio's death but lacked the malice or intent to kill. The judge described the act as terrible, noting that Godfrey allowed his temper to end the life of a young and talented musician. Godfrey Wamala was sentenced to 13 years, 3 months and 4 days in prison. On 20th June 2025, Uganda's Court of Appeal upheld Godfrey Wamala's conviction and sentence and rejected his complaints of inconsistent witness testimony and excessive punishment. The judges ruled that the witnesses were credible and noted that Godfrey's decision to flee the scene and hide for nearly 2 weeks were not the actions of an innocent man. The court maintained that the sentence was proportionate to the crime, citing the severity of the assault in which the victim was slammed onto a concrete floor with enough force to fracture his skull and cause irreversible brain damage. Mowzey Radio was laid to rest on February 3, 2018, at his mother's home, with hundreds of mourners turning up to celebrate his life. He left behind 3 children. His mother, Jane Kasubu, described him as a humble, generous, and supportive son who cared for his family. Radio's death marked the senseless loss of one of Uganda's most gifted musical talents, leaving a void in the country's entertainment scene and in the hearts of those who knew him. While justice was served through the conviction of his killer, his legacy lives on through his music, which continues to inspire and resonate with fans across Africa and beyond. Thank you so much for listening and watching until the end. As always, I would like to know your thoughts on this case, so feel free to comment. I'd also like to thank all 9,742 of you for subscribing and interacting with my channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.